So let me start by asking you a few questions. First, I want you to think about somebody in your life that you have absolute trust in, unconditional trust. They're the kind of person that you can count on them no matter what. And now the question is, how many people do you have in your life that are like that? You know, most people would say they have maybe a couple, three like that. So what difference would it make in your life if you had 10 or 12 or more? Or if every member of your team had that level of trustworthiness? Or your company was viewed in the marketplace as having a brand that had unconditional trust? What difference does that make? Well, it certainly would accelerate your performance. And I believe that if you want to take your team and yourself to the next level, you have to go to the next level of trust. Now, as Scott said, for 2 years I had the rare privilege and honor of being the flight leader and commanding officer of the Blue Angels. I've got a couple teenage daughters at home. Both of them are, frankly, smart alecks, and they refer to this picture as my Buzz Lightyear picture. They'd be yelling out, "To infinity and beyond." How many people here have seen a Blue Angel air show? Oh, good. I thought I recognized most of you. So let me tell you a couple things about the Blue Angels you may not realize. First of all, it's a 2-year assignment. So during your Navy career, you get the privilege of serving on the Blue Angels for 2 years. Now, so when you see the team fly, realize that 3 of the pilots are in their first year and 3 of them are in their second year. 50% turnover every year in the formation, which I think speaks volumes about the incredible professionalism that's out there in our fleet, Navy, and Marine Corps today, that we can have that kind of turnover and yet perform to this level of excellence year in and year out. This being the 69th year that the Blue Angels have been flying since 1946. Now, people ask me, they say, how close do you guys really fly? I mean, really, come on. And I'm here to tell you that if the wingman could roll down the window in their cockpit, they could reach out and touch either my jet or the jet that's in front of them. I'm talking 2 to 3 feet apart. I mean, look at this picture. This is the Blue Angel diamond formation. 4 pilots flying as one for 40 minutes. Extreme teamwork. I'm in the lead jet. Look how close my wingtips are to the canopies of Blue Angel number 2 and 3 on my left and right wing. And look how close their wingtips are behind my jet. Now, this isn't photoshopped. And if you were in Blue Angel number 4 in what we call the slot position, this is what it would look like. At 300, 400, 500 miles an hour, doing 3-dimensional aerobatics at very low altitude in cities and terrain all around the country. 6 days a week for 11 and a half months of the year for 2 years. That's the environment that these guys operate in day in and day out. Now, I don't want you to, I want to dispel a myth. And the myth is that as I talk to organizations and leaders all around the country, too often some of them say, you know, this is kind of cool, but this doesn't really apply to me. Because what you guys did had life and death consequences. It doesn't have life and death consequences for me at Procter & Gamble or Adobe Systems or Twitter or wherever. And I beg to differ. I don't believe that the principles of leadership and teamwork change when the consequences go up. You just can't afford to compromise. And if you're not willing to compromise as you lead your team, you too can share in extraordinary success. Now, when we're flying this close together, and here we are over our home field in Pensacola, Florida, the wingmen aren't looking around enjoying the scenery. They are intently focused on that moving piece of metal that is 2 feet away from them. Let me show you a video clip of a maneuver we did during an air show in San Francisco. We've come over the Bay Bridge, descended down to 150 feet. I'm going to call for the smoke. We're going to turn the smoke on, and we are going to do a formation roll as part of the air show.
Diamond roll, middle drive.
And notice the wingmen aren't looking around. We all pull back on the sticks individually in the cockpit and we climb together. Now when I want to roll the formation, I say, okay. On the cut and K, we all move the sticks in the cockpit at the same time and the jets roll as one. Now, thank you. Now, when I was leader of the team, every day, there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't remember the tragedy that befell our Air Force brethren, the Thunderbirds, when they were doing a formation loop in training and the leader didn't pull out. And because the wingmen are so intently focused on flying off the leader, they put 4 supersonic fighters symmetrically spaced into the desert floor north of Las Vegas, killing all 4 pilots. So the question for me as I joined the team as the leader was, what sort of behaviors do I have to have? What do I need to do as the leader so that these guys will come to work every day and willingly, enthusiastically, literally put their lives in my hands? What would that take? Imagine if your team depended upon you literally for their life every day. What would you have to do to earn that trust? Now, I'm not that smart, quite frankly, and I didn't have it all figured out ahead of time. But we had 2 really successful years, and when I look back on that experience, I realized there were 5 things that I had to pay attention to. And you have to pay attention to all 5. If you drop one out, there's going to be an issue that you're going to have to resolve. But the good news is, each time you pay attention to one, it reinforces the other 4. So you end up with this upward spiral of trust and confidence. And for each one of these, there was a question that my team was asking about me every day. And depending upon the answer they discerned, either consciously or unconsciously, they would make a judgment about my trustworthiness and make a decision on whether they're going to fly here or they're going to fly somewhere else out here. And it's all based on the axiom, in order to be trusted, you must be trustworthy. The first one related to character. And the question was simply, do you walk your talk? Do you keep your promises? Do you live up to your commitments? Do you live our core values, which in the Navy and Marine Corps we have 3, honor, courage, and commitment. And to the degree that I lived up to those core values, they would make a judgment. Now, as I travel around the country, I see these mission statements and value statements in corporations all over, typically posted on the wall when you walk into the greeting area. This is one that I think if you look at it, looks pretty good, right? Respect, integrity, communication, excellence. This is whose value statement that was. So it's not about the talk, it's about the walk. My team knew with absolute certainty when I showed up the first day that I would be there to lead them with a smile on my face when the sun was shining and the sky was blue and the air was smooth. But they knew that during the season we were going to have some storms, either literally or figuratively. And their question was, are you going to be with us when the going gets rough? And not only are you going to be with us, but are you going to play to win? Because if you're just going to show up to take names, to cast blame, to point fingers, forget about it. That's not what we want. We want you to show up and be the best leader you can be and lead us to victory through the storm. Now, where does commitment come from? Here's an organization that is so committed to standing watch in front of the tomb of the unknown soldier every minute of every day since 1948. Here they are standing watch during Hurricane Sandy. Or how about a couple years ago at the end of the Boston Marathon, 2 bombs detonate. There are people who are so committed to serving others that they instinctively turn and run towards the blast, not away. Where does that come from? Well, I believe it comes from a very deep, a very intense, and a very clear sense of purpose. We call it mission. Whenever you have a very clear, intense idea about why what you do is so important, people get up off the mat when they've been knocked down and get back and fight again. The challenge is, though, is that we as leaders typically shy away from talking about the why. We are really good talking about the how and the what, but too often we neglect to talk about the why. My experience has been that the team is hungry to know the why. Why is this work important? Why is it important to you as our leader? My first season, we did an air show in El Paso, Texas. Those of you that are familiar with South Texas know that it's always windy in South Texas, and this day it was windier than normal. It was 24 knots, blowing to 28, 29, almost 30 knot gusts. We showed up for our pre-flight briefing. I wasn't sure how this was all going to go. We make a couple adjustments to the formations, and we go out and we march down. We climb in the jets. We taxi out in formation, and we take the runway. I call for the power. We run up the throttles. We turn on the smoke. We release the brakes, and in formation, the Blue Angel Diamond goes rolling down the runway. As we get to 150 knots, we rotate and get the flight airborne. Here you see Blue Angel number 4 on the far left. He's got a full Buddha left rudder in. He's going to move wings level underneath the formation into that slot position as the landing gear comes up. I then level the formation at 20 feet above the runway, and we accelerate to 250 knots. Then I call for the pull. Up we go. On the G and go, we all pull back, and we go into the vertical. As soon as we start up, every fear I have is realized as we are getting thumped by this turbulence. And as we come over the top of our takeoff looping maneuver, I'm just hunkered down in that lead jet, trying to fly the most solid jet I can so my wingman can safely fly on my wing. We go from maneuver to maneuver, and about halfway through the show, I'm wondering, I don't know how we're not hitting each other, because we are getting rocked back and forth. And then I look in my rearview mirrors, and all I see behind me is blue and gold metal. These guys are welded in what we call Blue Angel close. And we fly a safe show that day, Nobody on the ground has any idea on how hard we're working up there. We land, we taxi in formation, we pull into the chocks, and on my signal, we simultaneously shut down all the engines, the canopies come open, and man, we are drenched in sweat and exhaustion. We climb out of the jets, we form up, we march back in unison, and we end the show with a smart salute to the crowd. And then it's, whew, man, that was a worker. Handshakes, big grins, high fives, and then as I turned to walk over to the maintenance van to talk to the technicians, Blue Angel number 2, our Marine Corps representative, Major Pat Cook, looks over at me and says, "Way to go, boss." Which for a fighter pilot in that vernacular is a huge compliment, let me tell you. But we were a different team after that show, because that day they learned that under the toughest conditions, I was going to show up and fly my best jet. And I learned that on the toughest conditions, they were going to be with me all the way. And our performance went to a new level because we went to a new level of trust. The next one is competence. The question was, as we sat down in our pre-flight briefing every day, I looked around the room at the other pilots. I could see the third question in their eyes. And the question was, are you good enough to be our leader today? Are you better than you were yesterday, but not as good as you're going to be tomorrow? Because we don't want to stay here. We want to keep getting better. And we can't get better if you don't get better. And not only are you skilled, but are you relevant? My wingmen were only mildly interested in the fact that I was a good dogfighter, an accurate bomber, and could land on the pitching deck of a carrier 1,000 miles from land. What they cared about was, could I fly a Blue Angel air show consistently, day after day after day? There were two things that were key to being masters in the jet. We grow up hearing this adage, practice makes perfect. We didn't believe that. What we believed was practice makes consistency. You're practicing poorly, haphazardly, indifferently, infrequently, that's the result you're going to get. What we believed was perfect practice makes perfect. So we never just walked down and sauntered into the jets and taxied out. We always, even when we're going from Pensacola, Florida to Nashville, Tennessee for the weekend, we would march down, climb in the jets, taxi out in formation, fly in formation. Our motto was, we want to practice till we get it right, then keep practicing until we can't get it wrong. The other thing was feedback. After every flight, without fail, we would have a debrief, up to 2 hours or more for a 40-minute flight. And in that debrief, we were very candid about our performance, making sure that we continued to improve every single day, getting better and better. The next one is connection. This is the one most leaders miss in this Mach 2 world we live in. By the middle of the season, we became so connected that I could change the trajectory of a maneuver simply by the inflection of my voice on the radios. If I needed to speed the roll to keep us underneath some clouds, I could. If I needed to pull harder at the bottom of a loop to miss a ridgeline, I could. If I needed to turn the formation sharper to go around a building, I could. Why? Because my wingmen behind me believed in their hearts that I understood what I was asking them to do. So that's the question. Do they believe you understand them? Which is a different question than do I believe I understand them? Because what I believe is interesting but not enough. What matters is what do they believe? And when they believe you get them, you understand their hopes and their concerns and their challenges, they'll follow you anywhere. The last one is communication. We could not afford to have miscommunication at 500 miles an hour. And so our debriefs always talked about how can we communicate better. The question for me was, do they understand me? Am I clear, concise, and direct? So that the message I intended to send was the one that they received. Now, we weren't perfect at this. I could tell you stories about Blue Angel number 5 and number 6. I called them the odd couple. Blue Angel number 5 was the Felix Unger, the obsessive compulsive. Everything had to be just right and lined up. Blue Angel number 6, Lieutenant Doug Verissimo, he was the Oscar Madison. He lived by, the seat of his pants. Everywhere he went, there were dust balls and gum wrappers. And these two guys, early on in our training, became more focused on their personal difference than our common mission. And so we had to sit them down and have a little bit of a trust intervention to get them reconnected so that they could perform. And they showed us that you don't have to be buddy-buddy. They would never go out and just socialize and hang out together, but they showed us that this is about building and maintaining a professional relationship of high trust at the highest levels of performance. Now, you might be surprised to know that we would never have said that we were the best pilots in the Navy and Marine Corps during our time with the Blue Angels, because there are extraordinary men and women flying off of aircraft carriers, amphibious ships, and expeditionary airfields every day and night. While we're sitting here tonight, they're taking the fight to the enemy in Syria and Iraq. But we would have looked you right in the eye, and we would have said with absolute conviction that for 2 years, we were the best team of pilots in the world, bar none. And that's because we were part of an organization of common people with an uncommon devotion to a core value of trustworthiness. And we went places and did things that we never thought was possible beforehand. And you can too. And a year from now, when you look back on this, and people ask you, how did you do it? I hope you'll say, like we did, not only did we do it, but we lined up, we got Blue Angel close, and we did it better than anyone in the world because we asked ourselves these 5 questions every single day. Thanks very much.